Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to talk about the property tax or rent rebate program that's administered by the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue. My name is John Christopher. I am a supervisor in the Customer Experience Center, and I've been with the department for about 7 years now, working with the property tax or rent rebate program. Alicia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alicia Gauntz. I am the chief of our Customer Outreach Relations and Engagement Division within the Customer Experience Center. I know that sounds like a lot, but essentially my area is responsible for the outreach and education efforts provided by the department. I want to thank you all for being here today, and I hope that you find this session to be both helpful and informative. Back to you, John.
We're going to cover a lot of information today, so please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. As Don mentioned earlier, you can enter your questions in chat, and he'll be there to assist you with any answers that he has. We're also going to be taking periodic breaks to address anything that we need to say out loud to the group. So today we're going to go over some general information about the program, as well as what requirements an applicant or a claimant must meet in order to be eligible. Next, we'll talk about what steps you can take to help your consumers when they come into your offices. Then we'll talk about filing the PA 1000. This is going to include information on paper filing, the benefits of our new electronic filing option. Next, we're going to go over some helpful tips on how to check the status of your rebate. And finally, we're going to wrap up the presentation by discussing what resources are available to you. So we're going to kick this off with a brief overview of the program. By definition, the property tax or rent rebate program is a program which provides rebates on property tax or rent paid in the previous year by income eligible seniors and people with disabilities. So the rebate program benefits eligible Pennsylvanians ages 65 and older, widows and widowers ages 50 and older, and people with disabilities ages 18 and older. In addition to claimants, spouses, personal representatives, or estates can also file rebate claims on behalf of claimants who lived at least one day during 2021, as long as they meet all other eligibility criteria. So the program itself is completely funded by the PA Lottery and Slots Gaming, so it's not funded using any taxpayer dollars. And since its inception back in 1971, the program's paid out more than $7.1 billion in property tax and rent relief. As of 2021, this application can now be filed electronically. Now, we do still have that option to paper file, but we do strongly recommend that you take advantage of the electronic option for several reasons, which we're going to discuss later on. Claims are due on June 30th, but the department has the option to extend that deadline until December 31st each year, if the funds are available. Now, if this happens, there's going to be a large press release and information will be advertised on our website. If a claimant files after that final deadline, the claim will not be accepted. And our final note is that only one claim can be filed per household. So we recommend that if there are two people in a household, they file under the claimant with the least amount of income. The claimant with the least amount of income is most likely to receive a higher rebate. Now let's discuss eligibility so you can see who qualifies for this program and why. So before you complete the claim, you'll want to determine what category your consumer falls under. Category A is the age qualifier. So the claimant must be 65 years or older by December 31st of the claim year. This is the most common category selected. Category B is used if that claimant is under the age of 65, but their spouse is 65 years or older. This category is the least common because typically the person who's 65 will file as the primary claimant. Category C is used by a widow or a widower who is anywhere between the ages of 50 and 64. This category only applies if that couple was still married at the time of that spouse's passing. Category D should be used if the claimant is 18 to 64 years old and they are permanently disabled. Now, if your customer does not fall under one of these categories, they do not qualify for the program. If a claimant is a first-time filer, there's a number of proof documents that will need to be sent in depending on the filing category. One of those documents is proof of age. So we accept a wide range of documentation to verify age. If you look up at the slide, you'll see that there's the driver's license or ID card, birth certificates, passports, and this list is even longer if you look in our instruction booklet. Once we verify someone's age, we do not require that this documentation is sent in moving forward. Now, if someone is filing on behalf of a widow or a widower, they'll need to provide that spouse's death certificate to verify marriage at the time of death. If a claimant is filing as disabled, we'll need to see a copy of the disability award letter. Now, an award letter is the document that is issued to that claimant stating the date that they were deemed to be disabled. The award letter shouldn't be confused with the annual statement that shows how much that claimant will be receiving monthly. This is a really common error that we see. If the claimant does not have their award letter, they should contact the entity that deemed them to be disabled for a copy of that letter. The last bullet point you'll see is about the physician's statement, which is a form that's included with the PA 1000 instruction booklet. Now, the physician statement will typically be used when a claimant is disabled, but they have not received their official award letter yet. So they'll need to take this statement to their physician to be completed and signed, and then they would send it back with their claim form. Now, that physician statement is rarely used, so it's not going to be accepted if someone has already been denied by the Social Security Administration if they apply for Social Security disability. If they are denied by the Social Security Administration, they're not eligible for this program unless they qualify under one of the other categories that we discussed. The next thing you'll need to determine is the rebate status. The rebate status simply means what type of rebate you're claiming. Are you filing a rebate for a property taxes paid or rebate for rent paid? In addition to identifying what category an applicant falls under, we also need to know if they are a property owner, a renter, or if they are an owner renter, because this will affect their eligibility income. And we're going to define what those statuses mean next. So in order to be considered a property owner, that claimant must meet three requirements. First, they must have owned the home, which means they would have a deed, a will, or a life estate to verify ownership. That claimant must have also occupied the home. They can only claim taxes for the portion of the year that they occupied that property. So if I owned a home in Pennsylvania and I only lived in that property for half the year, I can only claim the rebate for the portion of time I considered that home my primary residence. And third, taxes must have been paid for the claim year. Now, if the claimant is filing for 2021, the taxes must have been paid for 2021. Also, as long as that claimant owns the home, the taxes could be paid by someone else. So if I paid my parents' taxes for them and they own their home, they could still file for this program. In order to be considered a renter, that claimant must have rented and occupied a home, apartment, nursing home, boarding home, or some similar residence in PA during the claim year. The renter must have also had their own self-contained unit, which would include its own separate kitchen, bath, and bedroom. Single rooms are only acceptable if someone is living in a boarding home, a nursing home, or an assisted living facility. That claimant must have also had a true landlord-tenant relationship, which is typically going to be established by a lease or a written agreement between the landlord and the tenant. So this means that if someone is renting from a family member, there must be some type of written agreement to confirm that arrangement. The landlord must have also paid real estate taxes for the claim year or made a payment in lieu thereof. So if that landlord is a tax-exempt entity and is not required to pay taxes, then the claimant would not qualify for this program. The last point that we need to discuss on this slide is cash public assistance, which is a form of financial assistance that's granted to some renters. If the claimant receives cash public assistance for the entire year, they cannot file for this rebate. They wouldn't qualify. Now, if the claimant received cash public assistance for part of the year, they need to complete what's called the Schedule D to determine what portion of the rent that they can claim for the claim year. Now let's take a look at the definition for an owner-renter. So there are a number of scenarios when someone could be considered an owner-renter. And the first scenario is that claimant owned a home for part of the year and then rented a property for part of the year. So if someone owned a home for a portion of the year, they must complete the Schedule A. That Schedule A allows the claimant to calculate the portion of property taxes that they paid during the time they actually lived at that home. And they must also complete the rent certificate. So we'll talk about the rent certificate later on, but it must be completed by all renters. Second scenario, and this is the most common scenario for an owner-renter, is when a claimant owns their mobile home and rents the lot, or vice versa. So in this situation, they'd be required to provide proof of taxes paid and a completed rent certificate. It's also important to point out that uh, the claimant only qualifies as an owner-renter if their household income is less than $15,000 for the claim year. If their income is over that $15,000 threshold, they should file as an owner. And we're going to talk a little bit more about income on the next few slides. So when you're considering income thresholds, you must account for the household income. And household income is the total income that's earned by the claimant and the spouse if they are residing together. Income from a roommate or a minor child should not be included in this calculation. The maximum income amount differs for those who are homeowners versus those who are renters or owner renters for the year. So property owners can make a maximum of up to $35,000 a year, while renters or owner renters can make a maximum of $15,000 after the appropriate deductions. And there are certain lines of income that will be excluded or reduced when calculating this total household income. So for example, if you see the note at the bottom of the slide, it states that claimants can exclude half of Social Security or Railroad Retirement Tier 1 income and take a deduction for Federal Civil Service Retirement System income. If you're electronically filing, these figures will automatically be reduced. And you're going to see an example of that shortly. But if you're paper filing, you'll have to pay attention to these reductions when you're actually calculating the total household income. So you can see on this slide how the income that you report will affect your rebate amount. So your rebate's going to vary depending on the total household income for the year. And again, you can see that homeowners or property owners can make up to $35,000 a year and renters can make up to $15,000 a year. And you're going to see this on the front of the PA 1000 instruction booklet as well as on the PA 1000 claim form. So I mentioned earlier that there is an option to file a rebate on behalf of a deceased claimant who lived at least one day in 2021 and meets all other eligibility criteria. There's actually three different groups that can file on behalf of a decedent. And the first one is the surviving spouse. But before that surviving spouse files on behalf of a decedent, they must determine if they are eligible to file on their own. If they qualify on their own, they should file that claim under their Social Security number and list the deceased spouse as the secondary. If the surviving spouse does not qualify, they should file under that decedent's social, provide the death certificate, and sign the claim form as the surviving spouse. So the second group that can file on behalf of a decedent is the estate. And an estate can file on behalf of a decedent. They just need to provide different documentation depending on whether there is a will or not. If there is a will, we would need a short certificate showing who the executor or executrix is. And if there's no will, we'll need a decree of distribution or a court order appointing the administrator of that. And finally, you'll see a personal representative. So the personal rep is the person who paid for the funeral bills. They would need to provide receipted copies of the bill. to file on behalf of a decedent. They would also need to send in proof that they directly paid for those funeral expenses. Proof of payment could be a copy of the front and back of a check or a credit card statement or even a bank statement. In addition to the PA 1000, you'll need to complete the DEX-41, which is the application for a refund or rebate due to a decedent. You also may need to file the Schedule A or the Schedule G. The Schedule A, which I mentioned earlier, is used to prorate taxes paid, which you would use if that claimant only lived for a portion of the year. The Schedule G is used to annualize income. So we annualize income to determine how much the claimant would have earned if they lived the entire year. And this is used to eliminate people who would not have qualified if they actually did survive the entire claim year. If you're filing electronically via MyPath, you'll be asked if you're filing on behalf of a decedent. And the portal will automatically prompt you to fill out the appropriate schedules, and it will ask you for supporting documentation to be attached. And again, please keep in mind that the claimant must have been alive for at least 1 day out of the claim year. And additionally, you can only claim the amount of rent or taxes paid during the time that claimant was alive and occupied the property. The next thing we're going to cover is the supplemental rebate. All right, and you're not going to find any information about the supplemental rebate in the PA 1000 instruction booklet or the DFO. In order to qualify for this supplemental rebate, this claimant would have to fall under one of two categories. First, they're property owners who make less than $30,000 and live in Pittsburgh, Scranton, or Philadelphia. Or second, they're property owners who make less than $30,000 and have a high tax burden, which means their taxes are 15% or more of their total income. So obviously, if I had a $10,000 in income and I paid $3,000 in taxes, the taxes paid would equal 30% of my income. So I would qualify for the supplemental rebate. It's also referred to as a kicker. Now, if the claimant qualifies under either of these categories, they're automatically going to receive an additional rebate. And the supplemental rebate, if you see up on the slide here, is actually half of the maximum standard rebate. All right, so I am going to pass it off to Alicia, and she's going to take you through the next slides.
Thanks so much, John. Before I move forward, did anybody have any questions for John at this time for the content that he just went over? If you do, feel free to raise your hand. We'll call on you and take those questions. Looks like one just popped into the chat, John.
I see that. So if there's two renters in a property, only one person is going to qualify for that rebate. Now, they would both, if they both qualify for it, they would be filling out the regular PA 1000 claim form. They would also be completing the Schedule F, which could potentially affect the amount of rent that they can claim. And that would depend on whether or not both of the renters actually qualify for the rebate. But like I mentioned earlier, only one renter in that property would qualify for the rebate. And the idea would be that one of them would receive the money, and then if they both qualify, that money would then be split.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Kelly, for the question. Are there any other questions for John? This is a quiet group today. All right. So if there are no further questions, I'm going to talk to you all about how you can help your consumers and what resources we are going to be providing you to make your lives easier when handling property tax rent rebate. All right, so the first thing that I want to point out is the REV 573. This is the green handout that you see on the screen here. This was created as a quick informational flyer that summarizes the program for your consumers rather than handing them the entire booklet and expecting them to understand it. Similar to what John just did, the handout provides an overview of the program. This includes who can file for a property tax or rent rebate, when the deadline is to apply, and some information on different proof documents that will be accepted. The DPO 87, which is the navy blue handout on the screen, covers a little bit more about using our new MyPath portal, which we'll talk about in more detail in a few minutes. MyPath is definitely the fastest and most effective way to get your property tax rent rebate application into our system. In addition, this system is free and it does have automatic calculators built in to help reduce errors. You can also use MyPath to check your rebate status and respond to notices as well. And then the rest of the flyer gives you information about the actual program itself. The next way that you can help your consumers if they're interested in applying is to give them a copy of the PTRR proof document checklist. This checklist is 3 pages and it tells you what type of documents the department will accept based on what you are reporting. So page 1 focuses on what you'll need if you're a first-time filer. Again, first-time filers need to submit proof of age and/or disability. Page 2 focuses on whether you're an owner or a renter and what is considered acceptable proof of rent paid or property taxes paid. And then page 3 focuses on what items to send in based on the types of income that you're reporting. So if you know that you have someone coming into your office, you might be able to send them this proof document checklist ahead of time to ensure that they are prepared to answer your questions. It also will ensure that they bring those proof documents along because they will be required at the time of filing. And then the last resource that I'm going to talk about is the PTRR Quick Tips handout. So this handout here is more for you. Again, we talk about eligibility requirements, maximum rebate amounts based on income. We include a property tax rent rebate calendar of events, so you know when the filing season opens, around when the processing begins, when rebates generally start being mailed, and what the deadline is. We include information on paper filing and using the address label only if nothing has changed, followed by what schedules need to be completed based on the income being reported. We also outline what order in which you should complete the schedules. We're going to give you a little bit of information on electronic filing, what to do if you received a notice, checking your rebate status, and then finally information on the supplemental rebate amounts and resources should you have any questions. So this handout here is basically a summary of our entire presentation today. Hopefully, if you forget anything that we go over, anything that you learned, you can look back at this handout and it will refresh your memory. All right, so now let's talk about actually filing the PA 1000. If you are currently paper filing applications for your consumers, just remember that you have to mail those into the Department of Revenue. From there, the information is sent to our Bureau of Imaging and Document Management to be scanned into the systems. And then, if necessary, they're entered into a queue to be worked or reviewed by an examiner. So, as you can imagine, that handoff can be time consuming and cause delays in actually processing the application. I'm going to cover some quick tips about paper filing, but we really want to stress the benefits of the new electronic filing option that's available. So you're going to hear us talk about electronic filing a lot today and, the best way to do things through that new portal. All right, so if you are a person who wants to apply via a paper form, there are several different ways to obtain the forms that you need. First and foremost, any claimant who filed a property tax or rent rebate application in the previous tax year and was approved will automatically receive a PTRR booklet in the mail. This mailing also includes an address label that will help speed up the processing of their application. So as I mentioned, we ask that you only use the label if all of the information is still correct. So if you are speaking to your consumer, ask them if they applied previously, and then have them bring the booklet and the label in that they received if they're looking for help completing the forms. You can also download forms from the Department of Revenue's website, which is revenue.pa.gov. If you are doing this, we recommend that you fill in the PDF form on the computer and then you print it out and send it in to us. It does make it easier for our equipment to scan, and it will help speed up the processing. If for some reason you or your consumers don't have access to a computer, you can still order the forms to be mailed by calling 1-888-PA-TAXES. So you can see on the screen that is 1-888-728-2937, and you can get them sent out to you. Once the paper application is completed, it should be mailed to the address on the screen. So this address is also listed in the instruction booklet as well as on our website. It should be available for you to find. And one other thing I'd like to mention is new to 2021, the property tax rent rebate instruction booklet is now available in Spanish. But it's just the form, I'm sorry, it's just the instructions. The form itself hasn't actually been translated. However, if you do have a lot of consumers that speak Spanish, it may be worth sending them to our website to obtain that Spanish copy. All right, and for those of you who are filing via paper, I'd like to go over some common errors to avoid. Some of these might seem obvious, but we do see these issues on a daily basis, so we do like to mention it when possible. The first bullet here is all paper applications must be signed and the handwriting must be clear. So a common issue that we find is poorly written addresses. If an address is unable to be verified or it is miskeyed due to poor legibility, processing delays will occur. This is one of the reasons why we do encourage you to use the new electronic filing feature, because MyPath verifies all addresses against the United States Postal Service data, which helps to avoid issues with invalid addresses. The next item here is that all appropriate lines should be completed on both pages of the PA 1000, and all supporting documentation should be attached. So if lines are missed, the return will suspend. If you don't send in the necessary documentation, then we'll need to request it, and there will be processing delays. So we'd like to avoid that if possible. The next error has to do with software generated forms. It is important to understand that MyPath is the only way to electronically file for this program. Some software providers do offer the ability to fill out the PA 1000 online, and then they print it out for you to mail it in or your consumers to mail it in. We have noticed occasional issues where those software providers don't update their software to get all of the department's form changes. And then as a result, the information isn't data captured correctly. So for example, if you are dealing with a spouse, an estate, or personal representative who wants to file on behalf of a decedent, they need to ensure that they're filling in the filing on behalf of a decedent oval, which is under section 2, answer number 3 of the PA 1000 form. Hopefully you can kind of see it on the screen here. This particular oval has changed over the years, so whereas the actual location of the oval has remained the same, the context that goes with it has changed. Back in 2014, the oval was changed to the deceased claimant indicator, but it appears that some vendors are still populating the oval based upon the previous question, which was, have you received a property tax rent rebate in the past? I'm not sure if this would even apply to this group, but if you do use a software provider or your consumers use a software provider and you happen to take notice to it, please contact them to have that field corrected. And then the last thing that we have on the slide here is to avoid sending original documents. We ask that you please do not send original documents to the department. It is impossible for us to return them. The individuals who are opening the mail aren't really looking to see if they are originals or copies, and eventually they will be destroyed. So again, we want to avoid people losing important documents. Just send us copies. Once again, that might all seem like common sense, but we do see it enough to bring it to your attention. So just keep those in mind. All right, so now let's talk about electronic filing. I know I've hinted about it a lot, but let's see why this system here is so great. As some of you may be aware, the Department of Revenue is currently in the middle of a tax system modernization project, and it's being rolled out in several different phases. So part of the modernization project is to enhance our current electronic self-service options that are available to our customers. To do this, the department has launched a new external portal called MyPath, which stands for My Pennsylvania Tax Hub. In 2020, the property tax rent rebate program was integrated into the new system. So one of the most exciting features of the portal is to electronically file this form. As I mentioned previously, MyPath is the only way to electronically file the application. It is not available through other software providers at this time. To access the portal, you'll simply type in mypath.pa.gov, and you'll be taken directly to the MyPath homepage. All right, so this slide here shows you an image of that MyPath homepage. There are a few things that I want to point out. First of all, you can see that there are several different tiles that are broken down by categories. Within those tiles, there are hyperlinks to perform different functions. Anything that you see here on the homepage does not require you to create an account to utilize those features. So everything we're going to talk about today in regards to electronic options is available through the homepage without the need to create a user ID or password. The next thing that I want to point out is that customers tend to see this black login box at the top of the screen, and then they stop there. I can see why, especially if they're using their cell phone or their iPad. It is the first thing that you see, but you do want to keep scrolling until you can see the other tiles. I know it sounds silly, but we get a lot of calls, we get a lot of complaints. It is a common mistake that people make. So just make sure that you're scrolling and that you are looking through those tiles for the options. All right, so to begin filing your property tax rent rebate application, you will click on the option to apply for a property tax or rent rebate under the tile that's titled Rebates. MyPath can only be used to file claims for the current period. So you'll see here it says apply for a property tax rent rebate for 2021. If claimants choose to use this option, they do need to upload attachments right along with their application, such as that proof of age and/or disability that we talked about earlier. Um, this particular screen here that you see is what comes up once you click the apply for a property tax rent rebate link. You can see it outlines what is possibly needed before you even get started. And then there's a disclaimer stating that if your attachments are not able to be electronically uploaded with your application, you will need to file a paper application. We do accept many different file types. I personally recommend PDF. Often people ask how to get their documents to their desktop. We simply suggest that they take a picture with their cell phone or send an email to themselves, and then they can create a folder or simply label it in a way that they can easily recognize when they're completing the application. All right, so once you've selected next on the introduction page, you'll be taken through a series of questions. This software here is very intuitive, so based on how you answer the questions, it will determine what schedules need to be populated. This page will also stop the claimant from moving forward if they don't fall under one of the qualifying categories. All right, so in our example here, we're going to file the claim as a property owner that's over the age of 65. So yes, we're a first-time filer. Yes, this is being filed by a preparer. No, we're not the power of attorney. No, they don't have more than one home. No, the home is not used for any other purposes. No, we're not filing on behalf of the decedent. And no, there were not additional names on the deed or lease. Basically, by answering these first series of questions, we just completed that section 2 of the PA 1000, which is the filing status categories. From there, the program will start to ask questions about income. You can simply key in the appropriate amount of income for each category. So you can see in this example, we just entered $4,788 in Social Security income. And then once you get through the other income section, you can see that it calculates the total income for you. So in our example, the total income is automatically calculated to $2,394 because the system knew to split that Social Security income in half. Once the amount of tax is entered, the rebate amount is automatically calculated and populated. So if you take a look at the navigational bar at the top of the application, you'll see that this is present throughout the entire application process. You can use this bar to navigate to other sections of the application or simply use the previous and next buttons. All right, so once you've passed the rebate section, you'll enter the personal information for the claimant. So basically, this is section 1 of the physical PA 1000. One area that I do want to bring to your attention is the verify address button. So this must be selected for each transaction in which it's present. If you see the blue bar that says verify address, you want to make sure that you click on it. This is just confirming that the address is in compliance with the U.S. Postal Service standards and it is recognized as a valid address in their system. And then lastly, you'll need to select whether the rebate should be direct deposited or not. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't help but look at the chat. It looks like some people are saying they may not be able to see the PowerPoint. Can we just confirm that most people are seeing it? Okay, so we have a few people saying they're seeing it just fine. Thank you all. All right, so then this screen here that you see is the address validation that I just mentioned. You can see that our example, we entered the address as 393 Walnut Street in Harrisburg, PA 17128, but the US Postal Service is stating it should be 393 Walnut Street, Harrisburg, PA 17128, with the last four of the zip being 2005. If you see this box, simply select the correct one and then you'll click Save. So remember, if you are helping a repeat filer, they should have received a letter or a booklet from the department. So if their information is not changed, just type that into the address field as it's listed on there, and you shouldn't have any issues with moving forward. All right, so if you choose direct deposit for the rebate, which I strongly recommend, you'll be taken to a screen like this. At this point, you'll just select whether you'll be using checking or savings account, enter your account number, and enter your routing number. If the routing number is properly inputted into the system, the bank name should populate, and then you'll be asked to confirm your account number. So all of this is done in an effort to ensure that nothing is miskeyed and to make sure that that rebate goes into the correct account. All right, so the next step here is uploading your attachments. Again, we were warned in the beginning that this was required as part of the electronic application. Based on how you or your consumer answered the questions, MyPath will tell you what documents are required. You click Add and then select the files from your computer. So the system will ask you to select what type of attachment you're about to upload from the list of required documents. You'll choose the appropriate proof document and enter a description of the document. Then you'll simply select Choose File and navigate to the file on your desktop. And then you'll click OK to move to the next item. So once that's successfully uploaded, you'll be able to confirm and move to the next proof document. You can see on the screen there's an option to remove if you accidentally selected the wrong file or you labeled it incorrectly. Again, this is just another way to help ensure that you're doing everything correctly. You'll want to repeat those steps for each additional file that you have and then click Next to continue through the application. All right. So before the application itself can be finalized, you will need to complete the claimant oath by entering the preparer's name and phone number. You'll click next to move to the application summary. Just a reminder, if you are filing a claim on behalf of a claimant, list yourself as the preparer. If you then call into the Customer Experience Center, we will be able to speak with you without a power of attorney or your consumer needing to be present. So again, as long as you list yourself as a preparer, it gives us that authorization to talk to you. And then here you'll want to make sure that you review the rebate summary before fully submitting the application. Once you click submit, you'll receive a confirmation that requires you to acknowledge the information you submitted is true, complete, and accurate to the best of your ability. After the confirmation is completed, you will receive a confirmation screen that includes your submission information. If you want to keep track of the applications that you are completing, we recommend that you hang on to this confirmation number. You can keep it in a log in Excel along with all of the other confirmation numbers for your other consumers. Um, the confirmation information will also be emailed to the email address that was entered, but just keep in mind if you are using the same email to submit more than one claim, it doesn't give you any identifying information as far as what consumer this belongs to. So again, tracking in Excel along with your consumer's name and the last four of their social security number might be the best method for you. So if you take nothing else away from this presentation today, we want you to at least understand the benefits of electronic filing. We've touched on most of these already, but just as a recap, you received instant confirmation with a confirmation number that you can record for yourself and provide to your consumers. The system itself has error reducing automatic calculators that help you avoid math errors. Electronic filing requires that you submit attachments along with your filing. Therefore, it reduces the need for us to go out and request the information and the need for you to send it in to us later. It ensures there's no issues with handwriting and no issues with invalid addresses because it confirms with the United States Postal Service right away. It prevents you from needing to keep paper files, so you can easily print the PDF and save it to your network or track the confirmation number in an Excel spreadsheet. There's no need to wait for claims to be sent to our Bureau of Imaging and Document Management for processing. They'll be uploaded right into the system, which eliminates the chances of those documents getting lost. If you get a person that comes in last minute, you'll still be able to ensure that their submission gets here on time. The system is intuitive enough to identify what schedules need to be completed, so that takes the guesswork out of your end. And then last but certainly not least, MyPath instantly verifies the routing numbers and requires you to double key the bank account number when completing the direct deposit information in an effort to prevent issues with incorrect bank information. So at this time, I'm going to hand it back over to John to go over some helpful tips. But before I do, are there any questions related to this filing of the PA 1000?
All right. Well, I'm going to move on to the next slide. If you have, oh, here we go. We got one from Suzanne. Can we print the online forms in grayscale in order to see a printed version?
So Suzanne, when you are finished completing the property tax rent rebate application, there will be an option to print when you go to um, right before the confirmation, John, right? I'm pretty sure that's what the screen was.
Yeah. Oh, the confirmation screen?
So when they get it, when they fully finalize the application,
Yes.
they get the option to print it.
Yes.
If you missed printing it at that point, you can go into find a submission on the MyPath homepage. use that confirmation code that you received, and there will be an option to print it out from there as well.
Don, you answered Linda's question, but I just want to cover that again. So Linda's question was on a paper file. Do you need to put zeros on all lines not used? And the answer is definitely no. And the reason being, the more information that's entered onto that claim form that's unnecessary, it's more likely that something may be scanned in incorrectly. You'd be surprised at how many zeros end up looking like sixes when people put them in. And when those forms get scanned into our system, if it's reading those as numbers and potentially as income, then it may result in the claim being denied. So yeah, definitely don't answer. That's a good question, Linda.
There's another question here that Don answered, but we get this a lot. So they're asking, what if the consumer doesn't have an email address?
Mm.
You can use your email address to file on their behalf. It is truly just where we're sending the confirmation code. So whoever's email address you put in there is the person that's going to receive that confirmation code, but you will get it on your screen. It will populate as part of the application process.
Yeah, Catherine, you said you don't have email, and nor does the consumer. Like we said, we do still have the option to paper file, but we can't recommend enough. Maybe getting an email so you can electronically file stuff just because of how fast that information gets submitted to us. It eliminates so many variables that could potentially happen along the paper application process. But yeah, if you don't, you can still file by paper. All right, well, keep entering your questions in there. I'm going to continue with the slideshow, but we will answer them as they come up. All right, so next we're going to go over some helpful tips. And this one we already partially covered, but we're going to touch on it again because of how important it is. So regardless of whether you're paper filing or electronic filing, we recommend that you take advantage of direct deposit. It's faster because you don't have to wait for it to get mailed to you. It's easier, meaning you don't have to worry about taking it to a bank to deposit. And it's definitely more secure. There's no chance that it's going to get lost in the mail or misplaced. Um, yeah, we definitely recommend direct deposit. So there have been a few recent forms and instruction changes that we're going to cover. So two additional items have been added to the list of income that's not reported. One of them you should all be familiar with, which is the federal stimulus or economic impact payments received by claimants. They're not included in eligibility income for the property tax or rent rebate claimants. Now, STRIVE, which stands for Senior Tax Reduction Incentive Volunteer Exchange, they are program credits, and they are also not included in that eligibility income for the claimants. So there is a country code field that's been changed from a 3-character field to a 2-character field. If your current mailing address is in the United States, then you're not required to enter a country code. The department will automatically include the correct code for you. However, if one of your consumers lived at least part of the year in Pennsylvania, uh, and they meet the eligibility requirements for a property tax or rent paid, and their current mailing address is in any other country, then you would have to enter the alphabetic abbreviation for the mailing address country. Now, that information is available in the PA 1000 instruction booklet on page 6, and also this link that we included on the slideshow would take you to those alphabetic abbreviations. All right, the next thing we're going to go over is just some information about property taxes. So we mentioned before, a property owner can only claim actual taxes paid for 2021. And there are 3 allowable tax types. It's county, school district, and then city, borough, and township taxes. A property owner can't claim nuisance taxes, which vary depending on where they live. I've seen light pole taxes or fire hydrant taxes. Those can't be included when you're calculating the total taxes paid for the year. They also can't include any type of penalty and interest that was paid for the claim year. Another thing that we want you to be aware of is if there's additional names listed on the tax bills or any of the abbreviations that you'll see up on the slide, we would recommend that you send in proof of ownership, such as a deed, a will, or a trust agreement. So if there are multiple names listed on those tax bills, maybe some brothers and sisters all own a portion of a property, um, we would recommend that you just send in a deed with the claim form, unless it's previously been sent in. And the last thing we're going to cover on this slide is some additional proof documents that the department will accept if they don't have stamped or receipted property tax bills. So if someone's trying to prove what taxes were paid for the year, we would accept mortgage statements that show the amount of real estate taxes paid, or we would take a signed letter from the tax collector certifying the amount of real estate taxes that were paid during the claim year. We'd also take receipted copies of tax bills from an owners association or corporation uh, for residents in a cooperative housing corporation or condominium. There's one other item that we would take as well, which would simply be copies of the tax bills and also front and back copies of the checks that show those taxes were paid. So the next thing we're going to cover is really important. All renters must submit a fully completed rent certificate or rent certificates for each place that that claimant rented and occupied during the claim year. A completed rent certificate is signed by the landlord or the authorized agent to substantiate the amount of rent paid. And if they're unable to obtain a signature from that landlord, they must provide a fully completed rent certificate filled out by the claimant along with a completed and notarized occupancy affidavit stating the reason the landlord's signature could not be obtained. And the last note I want to say on this form is really important. So the department data captures this form. So this form must be completed in its entirety to prevent any type of processing delays. So when the form is not fully completed, or let's say that the math is incorrect, there's a possibility that the claim will suspend for review. All right, so making sure that this is completed fully, making sure the math is adding up is a really important part of this process. So Anne just said PowerPoint works, but sometimes slides don't match what you're discussing or slides aren't advancing. Is anyone else having that problem?
Yeah, so John, it looks good on my end. One thing I'd like to remind everyone is we will send out the PDF of the PowerPoint along with a copy of the recording. So you will have all of this information.
Linda, you said you have had denial letters because our local school district tax does not sign, but they do put date the amount was paid. Um, so one thing we do have an issue with is even though they may not stamp a tax bill as paid, um, sometimes they'll write like PD, they'll write the date, they'll write the check number, which unfortunately would still not count as receipted. All right, so that's why we have those other options. Now, if they don't, or they're not actually stamping that bill showing that it's paid, that's when I would send in a front and back of the canceled check and a copy of the bill, because obviously those two are going to match up, verifying the amount of taxes that were actually paid. All right, Kelly. Kelly's question, she said, I just want to confirm that two or more renters in a domiciliary care home would file together and include a Schedule F. Um, Or is it like a spouse? Are they living together? Or what's that situation, Kelly? And we can come back to that too. All right, we'll come back to that. I'll let you, okay, separate renters, same address. So they live in the same property, both renting, both qualify. You're correct. They would complete the Schedule F. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning, so they would, you would want to choose the person who has the least amount of income, have them file as the primary on the claim form, uh, and then you would complete the Schedule F, and then the idea would be that they would split the rebate, assuming they both qualify. Okay. All right, so earlier we talked about renters needing to have a true landlord-tenant relationship. If there's insufficient evidence of that relationship, there is a possibility that the department's going to ask for a copy of the lease. Now, if that claimant cannot provide the lease, we will accept a signed and notarized statement from that landlord, along with a copy of the utility bill from the claim year. And if they can't provide one of those two documents to verify that that relationship exists, um, the claim will ultimately be denied. This is a pretty common letter that goes out asking for supporting documentation. Okay, if that renter lives in a property owned by the housing authority, they must still include a completed rent certificate signed by a representative of that authority. If they're unable to obtain a signature, they can provide a letter or a statement from the housing authority that would contain all of the information you see listed on this slide. Basically, this letter from the housing authority is going to contain all of the same information that a rent certificate would. And it's not extremely common to see these, but we do see them a fair amount. And if a claimant brings you a letter from the housing authority, you just want to compare the information on that letter to what you see on this slide here to make sure it all matches up. And we will accept that in lieu of a rent certificate. Okay, our next tip is about the best way to send in information to us. So the very last tile on our MyPath homepage is the submissions tile. So the submissions are considered any type of payments, returns, or applications that are sent in via MyPath. Now, the submissions tile has an option to respond to a letter, and this option allows you to submit correspondence directly to the department in response to a notice or a request for information. It allows you to upload documents directly to the claimant's account using the letter ID from their notice. This gets information into our work queue faster, and it ensures that it's not lost in the mail. Just like other features, you can upload multiple documents at a time if need be. You're also going to see a link to find a submission. Now, this audience would probably only use this if they're trying to confirm that a claim was properly submitted. Right? You can also delete the claim within 24 hours using this link, or you can print a copy using this feature. And again, to check the actual rebate status, you would want to select "Where's my rebate?" Or you'd call 1-888-PA taxes. I highly recommend using the respond to a letter feature. It literally attaches that documentation directly to the claimant's account. All right, let's talk about amended claims. So let's say that you made a mathematical error when you were filing a claim. Maybe you didn't enter the total taxes paid, or maybe you forgot to include income. Now, if you were filing a personal income tax return, there would be a bubble that you would select that indicates you're filing an amended claim. But this doesn't exist on the PTRR claim form. But you can still amend by submitting another claim. And when you submit a second claim, it's basically going to override the first claim that you submitted. Right? So there's a few situations where we would ask you not to amend. So we don't want someone to amend a claim just to update direct deposit information. If you enter the incorrect direct deposit information, what's going to happen is we'll ultimately issue out a paper check to someone. All right, once you file a claim and once direct deposit information is submitted to us, we cannot change that information in any way. But if the account is closed, ultimately we'll send the money to that account. It's going to be rejected and sent back to the department, and then we'll issue out a paper check to the address on file. We also don't want you to amend if the claim was denied. So if a claim was denied, you should file with the Board of Appeals, which we're going to discuss on the next slide. We also don't recommend filing by paper and then amending via MyPath. And the reason being is if you file by paper and then you amend via MyPath, there's a possibility that the MyPath claim could post before that paper claim is received, which is going to cause processing problems. There's a significant time difference in the amount of time that it takes to process a paper claim. So if you're filing by paper, we don't recommend amending by MyPath because of the difference in time. All right, and our last helpful tip is about denied claims. So if a claim is denied, that claimant's going to receive a denial letter, and they have 90 days to appeal. That letter is going to contain instructions on how to electronically file an appeal with the Board of Appeals. Now, electronic appeals are filed at the Board of Appeals website, which you'll see on this slide, and the claimant would have to register for an account in order to petition, which is available right on their website. Now, if you're unable to file an electronic appeal, a petition can be filed using the REV-65, which is available on our website. And as you've heard many times today, we strongly recommend appealing electronically. It goes directly to the Board of Appeals. After a petition is filed, the BOA has 6 months to process that petition and then issue judgment. It doesn't always take that long. It's just the maximum time frame. All right, so I'm going to pass it back off to Alicia. Do we have any questions that anyone wants to ask before we do that?
So John, it looks like there's a couple questions out there about domiciliary care. I didn't know
Okay.
if you want to address those.
Let's take a look.
So they've been answering those themselves. Originally started out asking if there need to be a signed agreement. Yes, a domiciliary care facility usually has a signed agreement.
So Don, you're super faint. I know that you're trying to respond.
Sorry. The initial question on the domiciliary care facility was whether or not there was a rental agreement. And yes, most domiciliary care facilities have a rental agreement when a person goes into them. I think Amy or Matt had actually responded to those. That's why I didn't respond.
Gotcha.
Is there any other specific questions on dom care facilities from anyone?
Okay, it looks like Matt Trott has his hand up. Feel free to unmute yourself, Matt.
Yeah, go for it, Matt.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
So quick question. So I guess there is a checkbox on the property tax rent rebate for personal care boarding home and dom care. Is that right?
So there's a boarding home box on there. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's section 3 of the rent certificate.
You are correct, John. And underneath it, there's a domiciliary care. There's a boarding home, and then when you go down underneath personal care home name, there's a box for domiciliary care.
All right. Any other questions for John before we move forward? Okay. Let's talk about checking rebate status. So one important thing that you want to take note of is rebate checks will begin being distributed July 1st of each year, regardless of when you file. So whether you file in January, you file in April, they're not going to be distributed until July 1st. It does take an additional 4 to 6 weeks from the date your claim is approved for your rebate to be mailed or direct deposited. Again, rebates are not distributed prior to July 1st. I do believe that 2020 was the only time that we made an exception to that rule. That was in an effort to provide additional support during the height of the pandemic. But changing that date is not something that is solely determined by the Department of Revenue. There is an entire process that goes into making a change like that. Once your claim has been uploaded to our tax system, the claimant can check the status of their rebate at any time. We do ask that you wait 8 to 10 weeks from the date that the claim was mailed to check your status, as paper applications take time to get loaded into our system. So there are several different ways that you can check the status of a rebate. You can check the status of the rebate from the MyPath homepage by selecting the Where's My Rebate from the rebates tile. You will need to provide the claim year in question, the applicant's date of birth, and the social security number to use this feature. You can also check the status of the property tax rent rebate application by calling the automated toll-free number 1-888-PA-TAXES. Again, please be prepared to provide the social security number, the claim year, and the consumer's date of birth. Also, if a claimant's check was mailed out, but they didn't receive it, you must allow at least 30 days from the mail date before requesting a stop payment. So a stop payment request will take approximately 30 to 60 days before a new check is issued. If you provided a valid phone number on the claim form, your consumers really don't even need to call the department. They will receive an automated call once the application is received and loaded in the system, and will then make another automated call once it is approved for payment. So it is important to make your consumers aware that the department does make these calls so that they don't think they're being scammed. That is a common misconception. A lot of people will call into the department. Just know that we will never ask them for personal information. These calls are strictly automated phone calls pushing information to the claimants regarding the status of their application. All right, and then the last thing that we're going to do today is look at the resources that are available to you. So we talked a lot about MyPath and why you should use the new portal. If you have a question that is directly related to MyPath, we do have a MyPath chatbot who we name Pathfinder. Pathfinder is trained to answer questions about the portal, but it's not trained to answer taxability related questions. So the chatbot can be found in the top right-hand corner of your screen. It is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You also have the ability to email mypath@pa.gov or call us at 717-425-2495, extension path 1. And that will allow you to speak to a representative who's trained in MyPath. In addition, we've created a web page which is updated regularly to keep you in the loop with MyPath. So the URL for that web page is revenue.pa.gov/MyPathInformation. If you are reaching out to the department for help, it is extremely beneficial to obtain the support ID for MyPath. So this can be found in the top right-hand corner of your MyPath screen by clicking on the blue question mark, and then you'll select View Support ID. A box will pop up asking if you're sure you want to grant permission for the representative to view your session. You'll simply click yes, and then you'll receive a code. So you'll give that code to the representative. Once permission is granted, the department representative will be able to remotely view your MyPath session and see exactly where you're having difficulties. So again, extremely great feature. If you're having struggles in MyPath, make sure that you are providing that to the agent. All right. Furthermore, we will be providing a number of handouts that will contain information and assistance with the things that we talked about today. Most of these items we went over earlier in the presentation, but we will be sharing everything with Maria to send out to all of you guys. In addition to the informational flyers and the checklist, we'll be providing you with a MyPath user guide. This guide is a great place to start for any MyPath assistance. We've tried to include step-by-step instructions as well as screenshots to make it easier for you or your consumers to navigate through the new portal. Additionally, we do encourage customers to use our online customer service center. So we do have thousands of answers to common tax-related questions out there. We try to update these regularly so that they are helpful and relevant. You can also use this resource to submit a question to the department. So if you are in an online customer service center, you can submit questions that are either general or account specific. It also allows you to include attachments or supporting documentation. And then a department representative would respond within 72 business hours through a secure electronic process that's similar to receiving an email. We do want you to be aware, though, if you try to submit a question, it does require you to create an account first before you can actually use that feature. All right, so that concludes our presentation for today. I know we're ending a little bit early, but it gives plenty of time for questions. So if you guys have any questions for us, please feel free to ask them. All right, so Maria, I'll send all of the handouts over to you. I'll send the PDF of the PowerPoint over to you. And like Don mentioned, once we get the recording uploaded to YouTube and we get a link to that, we'll send that over to you as well.
Great, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for attending today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great